Welcome to another explainer. Picture this. You walk through your front door, kick off your shoes, and bam, there's a sudden, totally unexpected drain backup. Water is pooling up right where it absolutely shouldn't be. Now, your immediate instinct, naturally, is to just grab some towels, maybe a mop, clean up the visible mess, and call it a day, right? Well, what if I told you that the mess you can see is literally the least of your worries? Today, we're unpacking the hidden, incredibly fast-moving threat that follows a drain backup, using insights from the plumbing and drainage pros over at Dr. Drain. We're going to map out exactly how a seemingly minor plumbing headache can turn into a massive, invisible biological hazard right inside your walls. Okay, let's dive into this. When we really look at the timeline here, it is an incredibly tight ticking clock. Honestly, if you take away just one single number from our entire explainer today, let it be this one, 24 to 48 hours. That's it. That is your entire window of opportunity. The experts point out that mold can start growing within just 1 to 2 days after water exposure. So we're not talking weeks here. We're talking about a window so incredibly small that if a backup happens on a Friday night, by Sunday afternoon, a microscopic invasion could already be well underway. And that's before you'd even notice a single spot on your walls. Speed is absolutely crucial.
So what's the actual recipe mold needs to thrive? It basically comes down to 3 ingredients: moisture, organic material, and time. And unfortunately, a drain backup perfectly caters this meal right into your living room. The backup itself brings that sudden flood of moisture. Your home, literally the building materials keeping a roof over your head, supplies an all-you-can-eat buffet of organic material. And as we just covered, the time requirement? Shockingly minimal. When you mix these 3 together, you've got a perfect storm for microbial growth.
You know, this next part really made it click for me why a drain backup is just so much worse than dropping a picture of water on the floor. If you spill clean tap water, it evaporates, and for the most part, you're totally fine. But drain backup water, completely different beast. Experts classify this as contaminated water. It isn't just wet, it is literally teeming with microbes. Even after that gross water seems to have drained away, those microbes stay behind. And it's exactly this leftover contamination that fuels that super stubborn mold and those persistent musty odors you just can't seem to get rid of.
Which brings us to a really pivotal question. And I want you to genuinely think about this for a second. Where does the water actually hide once the puddles are gone? You know, you've mopped the tile, toweled off the baseboards, everything looks perfectly fine to the naked eye. But water is incredibly sneaky. To really grasp the risk we're dealing with, we have to look past the surface and shift our focus from the visible mess on the floor to the much more dangerous, invisible threat hiding just out of sight.
To understand that invisible threat, we need to talk about the very skeleton and skin of your house. Things like drywall paper, wood framing, particle board, and cellulose-based insulation. The big problem here, they are highly porous. They don't just get splashed, they act like giant hidden sponges. They soak up that contaminated drain water deep into their fibers, hold on to it, and then slowly release that moisture over time. And it's this slow release that drastically extends the timeline for mold growth, basically feeding those spores day after day. And that leads us straight to this kind of terrifying reality. Surface-level cleanliness is pretty much an illusion. You might touch your drywall and think, oh great, feels perfectly dry. But right behind those pristine finishes, hidden damp pockets are often still there. And it gets worse. The cavities inside your walls are usually warm and really poorly ventilated. According to the experts, these exact conditions act like an incubator, accelerating mold growth and letting it spread deeper into the structural cavities while you're sitting in the next room completely oblivious. Okay, so how do we actually fight back? You need an urgent, immediate action plan to beat that 48-hour clock. Step 1 is obvious, but absolutely critical. Stop the backup. Fix the plumbing issue right away so no new water gets in. Step 2. Get rid of any standing water immediately. And step 3, this is where most people drop the ball, dry thoroughly. You literally cannot just crack a window and hope for the best. You need to aggressively dry the space out using high-powered fans and dehumidifiers, specifically aimed at driving the humidity way down to dry out those stubborn hidden damp pockets.
So the crucial point is that while you're rushing to beat the clock, you absolutely cannot sacrifice your safety. Remember, we are dealing with microbial contamination here. If you're tackling the cleanup yourself, you've got to use containment strategies, like taping up plastic sheeting over doors to stop mold spores from traveling from the affected room into the rest of your house. Wear the right personal protective equipment for sure. And honestly, know your limits. If the backup brought in heavy sewage, or if huge sections of your walls and floors are soaked, calling in professional remediation is unequivocally the safer way to go.
Now, let's say you've run the fans, you've blasted the dehumidifier, and the room isn't flooded anymore. Whew! Well, it's time to challenge a very common, very dangerous assumption. Is it actually dry? Just because there isn't a puddle on the floor does not mean your drywall isn't still acting like a soggy sponge right beneath the paint. Believing a room is safe just because it's quote-unquote not flooded is exactly how these hidden mold colonies survive and thrive. To answer that question definitively, you really need the right tool. Enter the moisture meter. This is a specialized little gadget used by the pros, and it is the only true way to verify that those spongy, porous materials we talked about earlier aren't secretly hiding moisture. It totally takes the guesswork out of the whole equation. A moisture meter tells you exactly what's going on beneath the surface, confirming if those materials have actually dropped below that critical dampness threshold. But listen, even after the fans are off and the meters finally read dry, your job isn't quite over. Long-term vigilance is super important here. You need to keep monitoring the area for persistent musty odors, because that's usually your very first red flag. Keep an eye out for any new visible spotting or dampness. Keep your indoor humidity strictly under control and make sure the area is well ventilated. And here is a tough pill to swallow. Sometimes drywall and insulation that have been wet for too long simply cannot be saved. To completely eliminate the mold source, those permanently waterlogged materials just have to be ripped out and thrown away.
I want to wrap up today's explainer with a really powerful quote straight from the experts at Dr. Drain. They say, early action can be the difference between a manageable cleanup and a larger, costlier remediation. Man, that perfectly sums up our whole ticking clock narrative, doesn't it? The second contaminated water breaches your home, the countdown starts. Understanding this invisible threat, respecting that incredibly tight 24 to 48-hour timeline, and taking decisive, thorough action is literally your only defense against a microscopic takeover. So I'll leave you with this. If a pipe backed up in your home tonight, are you truly prepared to beat the clock before the hidden spread begins?